Welcome back to another explainer. So picture this. It is a super common scenario. A public figure tweets something, let's say, highly controversial. A massive online debate totally erupts, and then, 10 minutes later, they panic, and they hit delete. But what if you were right in the middle of building an academic paper or an investigative report around that exact moment? Well, today, we're basically acting as digital detectives. We're going to look at how to accurately and ethically cite social media using some pretty strict referencing guidelines. So settle in and let's get ready to build an absolutely airtight case for your citations.
Okay, let's dive into this. How do you preserve a post that might just disappear? Honestly, this is the core anxiety-inducing problem that researchers, journalists, and students have to face every single day. I mean, the internet is really only written in ink until the moment someone hits delete, or, until a platform gets sold and completely changes its entire structure. When you're trying to build an argument, a thesis, or an investigation around digital evidence, building it on quicksand just isn't going to work. You desperately need to lock that content down. You have to prove it existed exactly as it was, right at the exact moment you found it. But actually doing that in a way that stands up to fierce academic and professional scrutiny, yeah, that requires a whole lot more than just copying and pasting.
So, that brings us to Section 1, Anatomy of a Citation, the elements of evidence. Because to cite a social media post accurately, you aren't just grabbing a quick link. You are actually gathering a massive, meticulous amount of metadata clues. Think of it like building a forensic profile. You need the real name, well, if it's available. You need the account name or the handle. You need the year it was posted. You absolutely must include the post text itself, or at least a really concise description of what the media actually is. And we're not done. Then you've got to add the platform it was posted on, the exact date it went live, the specific URL, and finally your access date, meaning the exact day you, the researcher, actually laid eyes on it. It's a sheer rapid-fire volume of clues required to authenticate just one single post.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is how we can take that super intimidating list of requirements and make it a lot more digestible. We just break it down into 3 distinct, highly logical buckets of evidence, which makes the detective work infinitely more manageable for your workflow. First up is your author info. That's the real name, the handle, and the year. This neatly answers the question, who said it? Second is your post info, the text, the platform, and the exact date. This bucket answers what was said and where. And finally, the access info, the URL and the date you accessed it. This answers the absolute most critical investigative question of all, how can someone else actually go back and verify my work? Organizing your research into these 3 specific buckets, that is exactly what separates a messy draft from a totally bulletproof bibliography.
Right, so you spent all this time gathering an absolute mountain of data for the reference list at the end of your document. But how do you practically apply all these clues within the actual body of your text without totally bogging down your writing? Well, it's actually remarkably simple. When you're writing your sentence and you need to drop in the citation, the strict rule is just to use the author or their handle, followed by the year. That's literally it, author year. It keeps your writing incredibly clean and fast-paced, and it acts as this quick little signpost pointing your reader directly to that massive pile of evidence waiting for them in your references section.
Moving right along to Section 2, Preserving the Post, Finding the Balance.
The golden rule here is this: preserve enough wording to identify the post without reproducing excessive content. This represents a really delicate, critical balance in academic referencing. See, you're trying to pinpoint a highly specific digital moment in time. However, you can't just blindly copy and paste an entire 40-part thread or some massive multi-paragraph rant right into your reference list. You really have to be ruthlessly concise. You need to give the reader just enough of the text or a sharp enough description to know exactly what post you're talking about, but without cluttering up the permanent record with a bunch of excessive noise. But what happens when the text alone isn't enough? Or what if you're terrified the post is going to vanish before your paper is even published?
Which brings us to Section 3, the screenshot dilemma, original link versus image copy.
And this brilliantly illustrates the single most common trap researchers fall into. First off, let's talk about the original URL. This is the absolute, non-negotiable, primary requirement. As the source material strictly dictates, a screenshot is absolutely not a substitute for this link. You can't just drop a picture of a post in your paper and call it a day. An image just doesn't carry the underlying metadata that an academic auditor needs. However, there is a very important role for the appendix screenshot. This is your backup plan. If you're permitted to do so by your institution or your publication, keeping a copy of a screenshot safely tucked away in your appendix can be a total lifesaver. It really helps preserve content that ends up being deleted or suddenly changed by the author later on. Just always remember the golden rule here. The picture serves the link. The picture never ever replaces the link.
Okay, final phase. Section 4, Ethics and Execution. Finalizing the record. So, the crucial point is this. You must respect privacy and research ethics rules. Look, I get it. The internet can often feel like this massive free-for-all where absolutely everything public is just fair game to be dragged into a research paper. But the source guidelines give a very strict underlying warning here. Just because you have the technical ability to cite something doesn't mean you're suddenly exempt from standard ethical boundaries. We're dealing with real human beings. You must handle online data, especially data tied to vulnerable individuals or personal everyday accounts, with a rigorous, thoughtful respect for privacy protocols.
Let's move to and see how this builds into a final actionable workflow. Here is the strict sequence required to properly execute your citation. Step 1. Verify the account and the platform. Double-check that you aren't looking at an imposter account, because that happens all the time. Step 2. Verify the exact date and that highly specific post URL. You absolutely must do this manual verification first. Do not just skip straight to the automation. Once you've confirmed that your collected information is perfectly accurate, step 3 is to generate the reference. The source material specifically recommends utilizing the Harvard Reference Generator, which you can easily find at harvardreferencegenerator.co.uk, to assemble all your verified clues into the perfect professionally formatted Harvard social media reference.
Which leaves us with this final thought to reflect on today. As digital footprints vanish by the second across the web, are you ethically and meticulously preserving history, or are you just taking pictures? By following these strict metadata requirements, figuring out that delicate balance of exactly how much text to include, separating your primary URLs from your backup screenshots, and rigorously verifying your clues before you use any generation tools, you transition from being just a passive internet scroller into a true digital detective. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. Keep your records accurate and happy researching.